Welcome to Leadership Conversations. My name is Josh. I'm the pastor at Rehope Belfast, and I'm so thrilled that you're here today with us for today's great conversation. And hey, while you're here, why not hit subscribe wherever it is on your screen right now? Just go ahead, hit subscribe. We would love for you to get this content straight into your inbox as we continue to develop these conversations. So without further ado, let's dive into today's conversation, which I know is going to be such a blessing to you wherever you are. So without further ado, here's today's leadership conversation.
Amazing. Well, we're joined today by Tim Chaddick, a good friend of ours at Rehope. And Tim, why don't you just introduce yourself to us for those who maybe are kind of jumping in and don't know who you are. You were with us in Rehope, maybe, was it about a year ago, actually? It was about a year ago.
It was a year ago, yeah, it was spring.
You
I remember vividly because it was the first day of sunshine, I think, in Belfast for a very long time. And we had this all-day meeting scheduled indoors.
in a basement with no windows.
With no windows. I think the air conditioning was on too. It was just, yeah.
Yeah, that's our reality in that church, in that building, for sure, in the hotel. But yeah, so just, give us a snapshot on who you are, and what you do. So you're in London right now, pastoring Reality.
Yep. Yeah, so the short story is I'm part of the Reality family of churches, which is about a group of 9 churches, a little mini relational church planting movement that started in the early 2000s in California. Originally, my wife and I moved to LA and we started Reality LA, and we were there for 10 years. And then I appointed a successor, and then we moved to London at the end of 2015 to start a new congregation. So that started in 2016. So we've been here ever since. The church is about 3.5 years old now. We did kind of a year pre-launch, and we're located in the Old Street kind of area of Zone 1 in central London. And I've had the opportunity to partner together with a lot of great churches in London and beyond. And one of them is Rehope, and I loved my time there. And we have a few people in our congregation who are from Rehope in Glasgow. And so just feel a strong connection there. So
Amazing.
Happy to join you.
So good. So, obviously right now, we're speaking, I'm in my garage, made a little home office set up. I think you said you're in your dining room.
Yep, there's kids' crafts, and we've got resurrection eggs here for Easter. It's a total disaster, but it's making the best of it.
So just to put this into context for those who may be watching at another time of the year or another time in 3 years' time, this is a weird moment that we're in across the world. We're in the middle of coronavirus pandemic. We are locked into our houses, and it's a strange time. You were just telling me just before we jumped on the call, you yourself have been sick. There's been we know of people in our congregations who are sick, who are struggling with this. How are you before we look at church stuff, how are you doing in this whole season?
It definitely has hit everybody at slightly different times over the last month of things have unfolded. I ended up becoming pretty unwell for about 10 days. I'm almost positive that I've had the virus, fevers and coughing, a loss of taste and smell, and it's just crazy. So I was kind of isolated in my room for about 10 days. Thankfully, I'm doing much better. But there's a number of people in our congregation who have gotten it. And then obviously being in London, there's a number of people who are working with the NHS and who are kind of on the front lines to that. But I'm just really thankful to have kind of come out the other side. It really hit home because as of the time of this recording, the Prime Minister is still in intensive care, at least last I checked this morning. And so it just made me very grateful that it didn't get worse. But the reality of it is just it hit many people very quickly, not just economically, which that impacted everyone immediately, but the physical reality of it has definitely come pretty fast for us.
And what's London like right now? Obviously it's from your windows.
Right now it's very quiet. It's been strange. I think everyone knows any bigger city, I'm sure for you guys, even in Northern Ireland, Belfast, the cities are always going to be the epicenters. So even when you look at the charts, obviously London's way up there, just population in general, it's going to be ground zero. in many ways. I must say that the first week leading up to lockdown, and then the first week of lockdown, was very strange, especially in London, because most of us, we don't have a car. We're completely reliant on public transport, and you're just used to thousands of people. Our church has an office space, and I would just do my daily walk, 45 minutes down to the office, and everyone's either on foot next to loads of other people, or they're on a bus or a train. And the first week before lockdown, there was no government, or at least strict government regulation, so it was still just the kind of general social distancing guidelines, but you could tell there's a lot of the fear started rising, and you started seeing all the masks coming out, and everyone was like sanitizer everywhere, and that's obviously when the shelves started emptying, and the panic buying started and whatnot. So you just felt it. It started feeling like a Michael Bay action film. For anyone who doesn't know, Michael Bay does really cheesy action films like Transformers. I was waiting for The Rock to come in and rescue us all with like hand sanitizer and face masks or something like that. So it definitely felt, you felt it viscerally. It wasn't like my friends in the countryside who just got in their car and, the shop is empty. You really felt it. And then the first week of lockdown just felt very somber, because in a bustling city, when you look out your window and you're just used to seeing thousands of people and seeing no one, it just felt very ominous, very strange. I think by now we're kind of a little more used to it at this point, but the first
I saw a really funny tweet.
The week before the lockdown and the first week of the lockdown were very.
Yeah. I saw a really funny tweet the other day, which just simply said, "I wonder what all the pigeons are thinking." Like, suddenly the streets have emptied and all the pigeons are going, "Where's everyone gone?"
Yeah, I read that this is the best year ever for pets, dogs. Like, in their minds, they're like, "This is great. My owner plays with me every day. And 2020 was my year as a dog."
I know. Well, you're obviously leading a church, and as churches, we've had to obviously work out what a new normal looks like in leading church. Talking to other church leaders, I think we're all using the language of, it feels like we're having a plant church all over again, and stepping into new ways of doing.
That's very true.
New ways of building community, new ways of even just like delivering a message on Sunday feels so different. Like, how have you found leading church through this time? Like, what's that been like for you?
Well, there's what it's been like personally, and then I have there's 4 principles of how to respond in a time of crisis that I've reflected on personally, and then I've also been kind of helping like our little team kind of respond to as well. It's kind of a mixture of some of the best wisdom out there, but my first instinct is you protect. Well, name the 4, and then I'll just walk through what they mean for me personally, for us as a church. Protect, adapt, innovate, lead. Those are kind of the 4 principles. And the first one, protect, is before you think about anything else, you think of what are the absolute basics, what are the fundamentals, what do I just need to protect and make sure they're okay. So as a father, as a husband, immediately, like, is my family okay? One of my children has a particular medical condition. I had to kind of take her out of school early when all this was unfolding. Like, I got to just, protect that. When I think of church things, it's what are the absolute basics. We call them mission critical. Like, okay, we believe theologically that the gathering of the saints around Christ, his word, this corporate element, whether it's digital, whatever, like, okay, that needs to be protected. Our community groups, whatever anyone else calls them, life group, small group, okay, those are like mission critical. Prayer meeting, mission critical. Like, you just protect. I actually, when the news was unfolding, I was actually in California for a conference that got canceled 24 hours before, even though I had just flown out there, and things in the States started kind of, at least in California in particular, started getting pretty heavy pretty quickly. I had to rearrange my flight just to get home to make sure my family was okay. And that was the same way that we viewed it with the church. So first, you just protect. What are the absolute basics? There's a lot of other great stuff we'd love to do, but what are the basics? We've got to protect that. And then secondly, you adapt. Like, okay, if these are the important things, where do I need to adapt to make sure they continue? So Sundays, as we've all been doing, like, what are we going to do? Okay, well, we're going to have a digital gathering. Great. Are you going to do a live one? Are you going to do a pre-recorded one? Are we doing, for some, they were kind of doing house church stuff until the restrictions got really specific, which they are now. And so all that was kind of, okay, well, we just have to adapt. How do we take the mission critical things and then adapt them to meet this moment? And then you get into innovate, and that's when, okay, the mission critical stuff is being taken care of, and we've adapted to make sure that, okay, we have a plan for that. Now we innovate. What are some new things that we can do in this moment? Yes. So providing our church started, like, kind of instantly, a team started a support team. How can we discern the needs of the vulnerable in our church? Or how can we, as a lot of people have now done, help those who are self-isolating, buy things for them. Creative and innovative ways of evangelism in this time. That's the innovate part. And then the lead which is the last principle, you just do it. And one last thought on this that I learned from one of the, I can't remember what his official, he was a professor, and he helped with the Ebola outbreak a number of years ago. And he was being interviewed on one of the news outlets. And he said, there's one principle that becomes very, very important in these times. And he just said it so simply, but I thought, wow, that's very powerful. He said, speed trumps perfection. He said, there comes a point where you just have to, like, you can't get it just right. You've just got to do something. You just have to do it. You don't have all the time in the world. You don't have all the resources in the world. Speed trumps perfection. And that's what I mean by just lead. You just got to do it. Like, Sundays, it might not look great, or it might not work, or this didn't work, but you got to do something.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 ways that I've thought about it with my family, and then how we've thought about it, like, as a church: protect, adapt, innovate, and lead.
Great.
How's it been for you? How are you guys in Belfast? How have you had to respond?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to everyone, that for the first couple of weeks, everything shifted kind of week to week, whereas now I think we've settled into more of a rhythm, because this is what we have to do. Like, we're, for us, not having a building and being in a hotel, we were in conversation with the hotel like quite a long time before all of this kind of really came to a head.
The restrictions.
And so they were being advised by, like, the hotel board in the UK, and then they were advising us, like, oh, we might have to shut down. And so everything actually came to a head quite quickly. And so we made plans to move to doing churches in homes. And I remember very vividly, it was the last Sunday that we gathered in person in the hotel, and we gathered all of our small group leaders together straight after the service and kind of said, hey, next Sunday, we're foreseeing that we're likely to move to having church in your house. Are you prepared for that? Gather your community in your house, and that's what we're going to do. Well, that was Sunday. And then Monday, oh, we can't do that. Yeah. And so all those plans, so there was...
Yeah, I think we all have these ideas, like, okay, great, we'll do house churches. And then, like, 24 hours later, like, oh, right, can't do that either.
Can't do that. So then, it's the whole, like, innovate again. So then it's trying to think again, okay, well, what do we do? Keep those core things central, but then moving it to a different way. So then we moved it to, there was about 10 of us in Stephen's front room. Stephen's our worship pastor, and we recorded church on the Friday, pretending it was Sunday.
Oh, with people in the room.
With a few people in the room, and my wife and I, we hosted the service, and Stephen and my wife then led us in worship, and I spoke, and we recorded it, and we had a whole team set up, and we turned Stephen's garage into a recording space, and we got all our equipment in there and had the sound desk, and there was a great setup, albeit it was in someone's house. And that was the Sunday. And then on the Monday was then, we can't do that anymore.
Can't do that.
And so then it just shifted again. So we've had to constantly shift, as I'm sure, everybody has. I'm really grateful for people's willingness to move. I think the beautiful thing about this moment is that the decisions that we're making, people aren't surprised by them, because we're all in this together, And whenever we're sharing something with our leaders, they're not like, oh gosh, no, I don't like that idea. It's kind of like, okay, no, I realize that we have to make this because, and they get it.
Yeah, there's an incredible unity, I guess, that I mean, every organization, every institution, it'd be very unique if it was like only churches, you know, if this was like a church specific thing. I imagine that that's exactly how it is in countries where there's persecution. You know, that it's a very specific difficulty for just the church, but the fact that like all of society is literally dealing with this, I think there's been a lot of patience from people, a willingness to innovate and try new things, but also, like we've both been saying, there's core things we do not want to lose. Like we believe that these things are absolutely vital, and they don't become less so, they become more so, especially in times of crisis. So how do we make sure to hold on to those things and not lose them in the process?
And with the innovation piece, have you found that through this kind of season where things have shifted and there's been a rapid change, that you've been able to innovate and start new things that maybe, you know, you may not have done, or that you tried before and didn't work but are working now in this season? Like, have you got other things that you're doing, obviously, you know, in a very different context and way to which you'd maybe normally do it?
Yeah, I think there is, it's a mix, and I know we'll talk about loss and grief in a moment, but there was a lot of things like any other church that we had planned, especially for this season. We had, like, you know, kind of these very specific physical relational efforts all mapped out for evangelism, for, like, you know, weekend away, blah blah blah, like all these other things totally
Easter
planned.
celebrations, like this weekend is Easter, and it's like,
yeah, we were gonna, like anyone else, we were gonna, yeah, we had like baptisms planned and everything, and there was all that I think part of it was honestly just people wrapping their head around. I mean, it was just, even some of our staff was just working on having to, you know, cancel everything. We haven't been able to innovate too much, and I think a few things that we have done are not quite that unique, I guess. You know, I think some of the churches that are much larger, much more established, they have a lot more resources to do things. But the two areas in particular that have, maybe they're not necessarily new, but I think just our pastoral community care has increased 100-fold, because the needs are now much more apparent. We're able to utilize our community group leaders a lot more, starting this whole support effort. It was everyone kind of rallying together into like a central resource pot that's available for those in financial need or those in need of practical assistance. So in ways that maybe we never had been able to really do before. It was always our desire, I think, like anyone, you want to just know how to best care for everyone in the church community, but not everybody's really good at sharing their needs. And then maybe you don't have this concerted effort to meet those needs as a church. So that, like, overnight, like all these people just stepped in, and like some of the teachers are like, we can help tutor your children, and some who had financial resources obviously were able to give, or creative ways of work, and, you know, just all these different things have been absolutely amazing. And then the other part is just like everyone else, just utilizing, leaning into online platforms in a way that, not just that we weren't doing, but I think there's some things for me, and maybe you guys have noticed this as well, but I mean, I'm not judging anyone else in saying this, but I never wanted a YouTube channel. Like we just really, it was a specific decision for us as a church that we didn't do video, that we really, again, I know that sounds all judgy against those. I'm not saying that. It's just for us. Yeah. We just very much wanted to put all of our eggs into the basket of, we gather centrally in this part of London. Like, you have to have been there. Obviously we had the audio resources, but we really just focused on that. We had no desire or ambition to do anything else. And then overnight we're like, well, it would be really dumb to just kind of die on that hill right now. So I guess we're doing a YouTube channel, which I noticed Rehope has as well, I think. Yeah. Just like, this is what you got to do. But we've been able to do creative kind of like, you know, which I know you guys were doing, like the worship nights. We've been able to provide extra audio resources. One of our team members is doing a very specific evangelism focused one. So it's audio resource podcast that's like shareable to other people. I've been doing one on spiritual disciplines. Doing like an Instagram live thing for Good Friday, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think we've just been able to, I don't know, it doesn't really feel that novel because I think everyone's doing it right now. But yeah, that'd be an example of some ways we're trying to innovate.
That's great. Like, one of the things that we're starting actually on Monday is we're doing the marriage course over Zoom. And I was thinking this the other day, like we've got, I don't even know what the number is right now, but we had I think about 14 or 15 couples signed up within 5 days of us launching the marriage course. If we had done that in person, I don't think we'd have had that many, because pretty much so many of the families
schedules
and to come out and commit to 7 nights, getting babysitters, all that kind of stuff just is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And also for us as a church, like, we don't have a building. And so again, it just raises so many questions. Whereas then actually to be able to do that in your own living room, and then, over 14, 15, I don't know what it is, I'm hoping we might get way more than that. But it's one of those seasons where actually there is opportunity, it opens up opportunities.
Yeah,
I think that's what so many of us as churches are finding, that there's great opportunities. But I think the negative side to all of this, which you kind of mentioned there, is that of grief and loss. And I think as we go through this season, there's, we're going to encounter so many moments where we're going to experience loss and grief and move into that place of, real lament. And we're going to feel that a different way. So, I've got a holiday booked for a few weeks' time. I'm not going to have that. So that's going to be a moment of loss, which feels very trivial in the grand scheme of things. But, we all have those moments that we, as soon as a moment that we've been looked forward to, that date passes us by, whether that might be, it might be in your wedding. It might have been, we celebrated my wife's birthday last week. It kind of came and went very, there wasn't a marker for it, really.
Unceremoniously,
yeah. Like, our parents came and stood at the end of our driveway and waved, and then, it didn't really feel like a special birthday. And
just a car driving by, singing happy birthday. Bye.
Like, we're all experiencing those moments. And then there's obviously those more kind of tangible moments of loss and grief, where maybe a loved one passes, or someone we know is deeply sick, or and so we'll go through that process of grief as well. But there's also jobs and finances, and it's hitting us, as you've already said, at so many different levels. Like, any thoughts around lamenting well in this season? Because I think this is one thing, we have to learn how to lament well in this season.
And I think most people are familiar with the classic kind of 5 stages of grief, which is what there's: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I like the classic kind of 5 stages of grief. And I think a lot of people have heard that. I know there's some other schools of thought that have like 7 stages of grief. But I think the big point that is at least pastorally important for me is those stages are not linear. It's not like everybody experiences them in that order. Like, first you get angry, then you bargain, then you get depressed. Like, it just does not happen like that. And I think one thing I think this is important for leaders, or for anyone who's listening, even just in your friendships. This sounds very obvious, but it's important. But everyone is experiencing this in different ways. And you and I were chatting about this earlier. For some who are maybe younger and their family members, even distant family members, maybe are not particularly vulnerable. So the actual physical danger of this epidemic maybe is not something that's really hitting home for them. But economically, maybe they got furloughed, or maybe they were finishing uni and like they had their whole career planned out of them, or those who are maybe starting a new relationship, just started dating or whatever. Like, everyone's in different circumstances, and so we're all experiencing the disruption. And because the different circumstances have a different level of weight and meaning attached to them, you're going to just respond differently. So for some who felt, at least I've noticed in our church, there were some who have there was one man in our church who, it was within like 72 hours, lost his brother, lost his job. It was like everything just hit. And then they found out they couldn't hold the funeral. And actually the funeral's tomorrow. It's happening, on the internet and all of that. So gosh, think about that. You're dealing with the loss of a family member. It's just one of the, biggest things that you can experience personally. And then you can't even have the proper funeral. And then there's the economic impact, which just, for some of those people, what they felt instantly was more of the like depression part of it. Whereas I've noticed with others who have felt like maybe their careers have been taken away, they would all acknowledge that it's not as bad as having somebody dying in a hospital, but they're angry. Like, wait, I had my plan. And
yeah,
I think, in some ways, I think it's like you say, I think it's an important time that we learn what the Bible says about lament and grief, which does not mean, I think Christians probably go, I've noticed two extremes. I don't know. I'll ask what your experience is, but I've noticed two extremes. I think some Christians, they paper over the cracks. Everything's fine. I got the joy of the Lord. I'm like praising Jesus in my PJs on a Sunday morning, and it's fine that my relatives are, deathly ill and all those types of things. So that's kind of your bury your head in the sand, kind of a very superficial kind of Christianity, like praise the Lord always and things like that. But then there's the other extreme I've noticed where there'd be a lot more people I know who they know that the Bible has a category for lament and grief, but they're almost there's two ways to be mad in regards to God. Charles Spurgeon said, you can neither be mad with your fist closed or your hand open.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the Psalms, you see this, there's this kind of anger, but it's with hands open, not with like fists closed, as if you were God.
Yeah.
And I've noticed in some that this whole disaster has actually unearthed a lot of, and I don't say this lightly, but entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
Like their definition of joy, I've noticed for some, is that things go my way. And now control has been taken out. And so I'm angry. And I don't know, it reveals everyone's theology. And what we've been trying to remind people is like, look, joy, Christian joy, is not getting what you want. It's learning to align yourself with what God is doing.
Yeah.
Like, it's all I got.
Yeah.
And I think the biblical understanding of grief is getting to that point of, each one of those categories. I do think those 5 ones, you do find those in scriptures. Again, they're not laid out that perfectly, but I think acceptance in our Christian worldview takes on, I think most in secular society, acceptance is like, well, it is what it is. But I feel incredibly grateful that we have this resource that, as we're approaching Easter this week, that acceptance has so much more hope attached to it, that we believe in a God who never promised that we wouldn't suffer, but that when we suffer, he's going to be with us, and he somehow turns this to glory.
Yeah.
And I have proof of that.
Yeah.
I think it's just helping people to learn how to grieve. I don't know what the experience has been for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, for us as a church, we've been working through the I am statements from Jesus in the book of John, where he declares, "This is who I am." And I thought it was so important that we rallied around those words through this season, because again, we can look at what Jesus does, and that he heals, and that he loves people, and that he, all of that stuff is good and true. But actually, I was just like, we want to center ourselves around, this is who Jesus says he is, because again, so many voices in this season are going to say, well, this is who Jesus is. So like for Easter, I'm speaking on where Jesus in the book of John says that I am the resurrection, which is a huge statement, but that statement comes out of the back of a death and a loss and grief, where Martha comes running at Jesus and essentially is saying, if you were here,
where were you?
Where were you? Like, this would have all been different if you were here. But Jesus had, through his own understanding of the situation, he decided, actually, no, I'm going to stay where I am teaching, because I know that what is going to happen is going to be for my Father's glory. Mm-hmm. And then when he turns up, Martha is absolutely raging at him. Yep. If only you had been here, then everything would have been different. And one commentary I was reading this week was talking around actually how Lazarus's sickness would have been very similar in some ways, and it didn't use the language of the coronavirus, but could have been very similar to that type of a virus, where they'd have been watching him struggling, life ebbing out of him, breath, just gradually becoming harder and harder, and he would have been bedbound. And as the two sisters, Mary and Martha, they'd have been looking on and going, we need help. We can't do this. Again, it comes into the whole area of control. I spoke of control actually here a few weeks ago, that there are so many things in our life that we've had control of for so long. And now all of a sudden everything's out of our hands. Yeah, we take it for granted, totally. Whereas now, actually when we step away from all that we thought was, entitlement, what we thought was ours, what we thought we had worked hard to achieve, all of that stuff, when it gets stripped away, actually what we find, and this is a fascinating study. I don't know if you read the study from the university in Copenhagen, was it, where I think Mark Sayers spoke about it a little while ago, around
Oh yeah,
who are praying. Like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I actually found if anybody wants to search for it, the Christian Post. It's called, or the report is actually called "In Crisis We Pray." It's the name that the associate professor did.
I've read the article. It's a great, really interesting secular study. Really interesting. Just on it's not even incremental. It's just like through the roof.
Yeah,
like we're praying. And so one of the things that I mentioned in a talk the other week was that when we pray, part of us praying is that we're admitting that we can't control a situation, and so we're looking for an outside.
Yeah, the act itself is an acknowledgement.
Yeah, like I'm unable to control this situation. I need an outside force bigger than myself to come in. And obviously, within a Christian mindset, we say, well, that's God, that's Creator, who is able to come in and break into our situations and to bring that which we need. And so, just an acknowledgement of I can't do this, I can't control, is such an amazing thing that I think for many people, whether they're Christians or not, are starting to kind of become awakened to. That we're finite, so we're understanding a little bit more about what it means to die. We're not going to live forever. But then two, that there are bigger powers at play in this world. Again, some people call them spiritual, others will call them other things as well. But we as Christians would testify to the truth that God is who He says He is through His scriptures, and that is where we can place our hope and our trust. And so, let's just shift a little gears for maybe just one final question, just around the spiritual disciplines, because again, this is part of living in the reality that life is chaotic, life is just a total unknown in some ways, and day to day it's very different, and our experiences of the way that we live our life right now is going to shape. And this is one thing that I keep coming back to in my mind, is what I do in my day to day now is going to shape me for who I'm going to become out of the back of this pandemic. If I start drinking heavily now, which I'm not, but if I start drinking heavily now,
thank you for that clarification.
Just to clarify, that's my response to this moment, is I'm just going to grab the bottle and start drinking. Just because the pandemic breaks doesn't mean that I'm then going to lay the bottle aside. But on the other side of it is, what are those healthy habits, those practices that we read of in scriptures, that actually this moment where for some of us, maybe we are on furlough, life has slowed down dramatically because we don't have to commute. We don't have the rush hour of madness. We don't have all of that stuff. So actually there's an opportunity for us to pick up some things that can help to aid us in our grief and our sorrow and our lament, but also aid us in becoming more Christ-like.
And as you say, continuing beyond the crisis, effective in the crisis, but continuing beyond when your regular schedule does come back and you don't have the time that you had. Absolutely.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, spiritual disciplines in general is a topic that thankfully has become more and more, dare I say, popular, like in the last 10 years, at least. And what I mean by that is there's a lot more books written on it. There's a lot more resources about it. People are just talking about it more, obviously, depending on someone's tradition. It's not new for them. But the only downside is that spiritual disciplines can sound kind of almost like very lofty, like a lot of popular podcasts very much leaning into like kind of Roman Catholic tradition and rule for life and Benedictine order and all that. And, some people are super into that. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm Augustine now and I'm, Benedict or whatever. And obviously there's a lot to glean from church history in general, but I think it's probably good to start with a basic understanding. Like my understanding of spiritual disciplines is habits for wholeness. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple way to say it. And I think framing it in terms of habits, discipline is a good word. It's not a dirty word, as we all know, but I think habits just carries this idea that, like you just alluded to, there needs to be thing that I'm investing in now, but that will also extend beyond this time. Who will I become and what can I carry into the next season? One of the most helpful resources, I don't know if you guys use it, is Adele Calhoun's book called The Spiritual Disciplines Handbook. Have you guys come across that? I don't have a copy handy, but the reason I love that book, I was given 8 years ago, I was given a sabbatical when I was back in LA. I was given 3 months paid time off after planting and leaving the church for like 7.5 years. And this book was recommended to me, and it was amazing because it's not a regular book where you just kind of read through it chapter by chapter. It's literally a list of like, I think there's probably 50 disciplines there. So it's very much a handbook. It's a workbook. So it's like lament, journaling, solitude, fasting, whatever it is. It just gives a simple definition, a kind of maybe a reflection on it, some exercise suggestions, and then maybe some reflection questions and all that. And it was so helpful to me. And what was great about that season for me personally is that a lot of the things that I was able to practice, I really did take over into like daily life, and they've just stuck with me. And I'll just mention a few. I don't think they're particularly novel, but for me, and I know this sounds so simple, almost cliche, but morning prayer.
Yeah.
And specifically for me, what I've done for almost 8 years now is I go through the Lord's Prayer every single morning. And I go through thematically. So Father in heaven, it's just reflecting on who he is. Your kingdom come, God, reign over me, reign over my wife, reign over my children, reign over my church, reign over London. That's how I just kind of pray through. So that's how I think about it. And then like, your will be done. Well, now I'm praying for my prayer life used to be very spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an awesome, beautiful prophetic part of that. I believe God does that. But I also realized that so often my prayer life was very reactionary.
Yeah.
If my day was going bad, I'm like, oh Lord, I would cry out and be very passionate, but I didn't have this regularity to it. So for me, morning prayer is massive. And if someone doesn't have that regular rhythm now, I would highly recommend that in this time of kind of forced isolation, that morning prayer becomes a habit. And it'll probably take 2 months to really drill that in so that you actually miss it when you're not doing it. And starting with the Lord's Prayer, for me, it's just, I've never been bored of it. It's like my thing now. I get sad if I miss it. And I'm not saying that because I'm like particularly disciplined or super spiritual. Like it just, oh my word. It's like, yes, this is like, I need this thing. It's like my anchoring point.
Yeah.
So for
I
me,
think
morning prayer,
that's when a discipline becomes, again, discipline's not a dirty word, but that's when it shifts into becoming like life-giving and joy-filled. When you know that, oh, if I haven't done that, I miss it.
Yeah.
Feel
and
that.
The work comes from setting the alarm. The work comes from like, I don't think anyone would say the work is necessary in the moment, but the work is in making sure that you've still maintained that time necessary for it.
Yes.
I think that's when it'll go away. I don't think people will start praying and then go, oh, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, now I'm back to work and I'm going to, sleep until half sick or whatever it is. I think that's when it starts becoming slightly different.
Yeah. Any other things that you've
Yeah, there's a few others. One for me, maybe this is just because I'm a little ADD, but prayer walking.
Mm-hmm.
So the morning prayer is massive for me, and it's a little more not regimented, but like I said, I use the Lord's Prayer, and I kind of put all the things in my list that kind of just nicely fit into the themes of the Lord's Prayer. But then to still allow time for just prophetic, spontaneous prayer, I just plan prayer walks. And right now we get our apportioned, allotted daily exercise walk. So for anyone looking for ideas, the prayer walk for me is like, I don't know why it's my body's physically moving, but it's not exercise to where, I think you're so focused on the task that you're doing. But I just find being really reflective, and I'm just able to kind of pour out my heart to God in a way that I normally maybe wouldn't do in the morning. And I'm just able to kind of be like more of the psalmist, like, God, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And that's where I have, for me, lament and grief and all those kinds of things have just fit. I've had times where I've just had to cry over the last few weeks because of the health of my daughter and a lot of the, kind of changes that have been brought to us personally before this. And then now, like you said, canceling your holiday, it might seem trite to someone, but as a family, that's a big deal. And we just canceled our holiday that we had planned for like months. My wife spent so much time planning it. And those times, the prayer walk, I felt like, and especially if you're like, you and I, we have kids, so you don't really have like, well, you've got your nice little kind of space there. Not everybody has that. So just going for a walk, just something amazing about it. For others, journaling isn't something I do regularly. It's something I do seasonally. When I feel like there's a particular transition season coming up, I tend to journal a lot more. Adele Calhoun's Spiritual Disciplines Handbook on Journaling is a really good place to start for people who haven't done it. And the last thing I would mention is, I know we have community groups, we have, some people have triads, but I have found it is so spiritually healthy, and I think it should be more disciplined, that you talk regularly to like one or two other people as you process and pray through things, almost like a confidant of sorts, because I think in community, there's a massive part of that that's necessary for our spiritual health. There's a lot of different voices involved. I think we all believe that's how discipleship happens. You don't get discipled by one person, you get discipled by a church. Yeah. But having said that, there is something about the Paul writing a letter to Timothy and having an ongoing dialogue. So I have like two people I talk to every single week. It's almost like a discipline, and we just talk, and we're able to pick right up where we left off. And I'm able to get a little more of that objective, because so many of the spiritual disciplines are very much focused on like solitude, or like me and Jesus. And that's awesome. Many of them are and should be. But there's this other little missing middle, I guess. The other side is community. Lots of people, your Zoom groups, which I know we're all kind of burnt out at this point, but there's this missing middle. I think that's really important that you cultivate long-term, just one or two people, commit for the next few years, that you just talk to them about your stuff, and you're able to pick up where you left off. How are you dealing with, hey, Josh, you had to cancel your holiday. Like, that's so sad. How are you guys thinking about it this week? Oh, well, glad you asked. Like, I don't know. There's something so powerful.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so
good. John Wesley, I mean, I think the triad thing was pretty powerful. Mark Sayers in his leadership podcast has been talking about that lately, that the triad was like the missing middle.
Yeah, that's really good. Tim, let's wrap this up with one final question, and it's quite a big one, but like, what do you sense Jesus is kind of calling his church into in this time? Like, what do you think is stirring?
Gosh, I mean, from what I'm sure all of us we've heard, I think every country, every city is going to have a slightly nuanced, maybe kind of a prophetic sense about it. The one thing that seems to be generally true is, I think, to put it in a phrase, transition. So this is a season of transition. Like, our churches are not going to be the same after this. Our lives are not going to be the same. Work's not going to be the same. We all know that. We don't know how it's not going to be the same, but we know that. Yeah. I do think that, and you see this in scripture, I think transition can become an opportunity for temptation or transformation. And good. If you know me, I like alliteration, and it's super cheesy, but it's absolutely true. So good. Yeah. Every transition, your foundation is shaking, and it either becomes a temptation to, be grasped for control, or all of your like worst qualities come out, or you go to quick fixes. You just try to hold on to the past. Like, I mean, in church life, that happens, right? Like, you move locations, change leaders, or whatever. Like, transition becomes an opportunity for good or for bad, for temptation or transformation. Yeah. But I think the reason it becomes an opportunity for transformation is because you have to ask the big questions. Okay, what is this all about? My church always said we're all about following Jesus. And I was like, cool, show up on a Sunday. But now I actually have to wrestle with that. Is it really all about Jesus for me? Is it really all about this? Like, what is my foundation and what is my direction? Like, what if everything gets stripped away, what actually is the core thing? Not just my little Instagram bio statement, but what actually in my heart is my foundation? And then what is my direction? Yeah. Because my only aspirations were, getting the pay rise at that job, or, moving away from this job to get my next job. Oh, wait, now that's canceled. Like, surely our aspirations have to be much, much bigger than that. So as it's cliche, but people will become bitter or better. Like you already alluded to, we're going to come out of this one way. And I keep asking myself the question you mentioned, like, who will I become? How will I be remembered during this time? And yeah, it's either temptation to go away, or you're going to totally become more and more like Jesus. So make no mistake, now is that time. Now is the kind of furnace of testing. Yeah.
Wow. Tim, this has been so helpful.
Which is a happy note, right? Welcome to the furnace. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
And on that note, would you pray for us? Yeah, just pray for us into that moment that you're kind of sensing, that furnace moment, and yeah, just pray blessing over whoever's engaging with us right now. Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, Heavenly Father, thank you that you are not on the edge of your seat, wondering how this pandemic is all going to play out and what it means for our lives, for our churches, our ministries, our families, our jobs. Thank you that you are sovereign. And though we wrestle with how that plays out and how we understand suffering, Lord, at the end of the day, we just pray a childlike prayer saying, you are Lord, you are sovereign. And I do pray for whoever's listening right now. We know that this season raises all kinds of very personal issues for them. They have their own hopes and dreams and aspirations, and wherever they are in the different stages of grief, I pray that they would learn to sit with that in your presence. I pray that your Spirit would be so present for every single person, every single ministry, Lord, whether they feel like they've been put on the shelf or not, that they would just sense your presence with them, and that you never promised that we wouldn't suffer, but when we do, you will be with us and you will bring about things for your glory. And so I pray that there would be a renewed hope, not a bury your head in the sand, wishful thinking, nor just an entitled anger against you, but just a resolute, yeah, this is hard, but I'm going to trust you. This is hard, but I'm going to trust you. And I pray that they would find peace in the surrender and in this furnace, knowing that you're going to allow testing, not to bring out the bad, but to prove the good. And I just pray that you would do that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks, buddy. So good to see you.